Emotions. They pretty much run our lives, right? Happiness, anger, sadness, fear, they feel so real, so solid, like these undeniable facts of our existence. But what if I told you they're not what they seem at all? Okay, let's dive into this because what an emotion actually is, well, it turns out to be one of the most fascinating and hotly debated questions in all of science and philosophy. So let's just start with the biggest question right out of the gate. What is an emotion? It feels like it should be a simple question, but honestly, after centuries of brilliant people studying it, we still haven't landed on one single answer that everyone agrees on.
And a huge part of the problem is that the word emotion is this giant umbrella term for so many different things. Are we talking about the feeling inside you or the physiological stuff, your heart racing? Or is it about what you do, like the urge to run away? Or maybe it's just a social label we slap on things, like calling someone hangry. It's a messy concept to pin down.
Now, all this confusion has basically led to two major competing teams in psychology, and they each have a completely different idea about where emotions even come from. Are they baked into our DNA, or are they something we build ourselves, moment by moment? Okay, so this slide really lays out the two big ideas. On one side, you've got discrete emotion theory. This is the idea that we're all born with a small set of basic, universal emotions. They're hardwired. On the other side, you have the theory of constructed emotion. This view says, no, your brain isn't just firing off a preset fear program. It's actively building the experience of fear by interpreting signals from your body based on what's happening around you. So that racing heart, it isn't automatically fear. It could be excitement if you're on a roller coaster, or anger if you're in an argument. Same sensation, totally different emotion. So, with this huge debate raging, neuroscientists thought, hey, we can solve this. The plan was pretty simple, really. Let's just look inside the brain with our fancy scanners and find the physical proof. Let's find the unique signature for each emotion. The hunt was on for the smoking gun. I mean, if emotions really are these distinct hardwired things, then scientists should be able to find a unique neural fingerprint for each one, right? A specific brain circuit that lights up for sadness, and a totally different one for joy. They figured the evidence would be right there, clear as day. But the result was, well, it was a huge surprise. After tons and tons of studies, they just couldn't find them. Turns out, there are no consistent one-to-one neural markers for specific emotions. And this is where it gets really fascinating. Take the amygdala, for instance. We've all heard it called the fear center of the brain, right? Well, it also gets fired up during really positive experiences. Other key brain areas, they're total multitaskers, involved in all sorts of different states, not just one. It's the same story with our bodies. A racing heart and sweaty palms can't tell you on their own if you're feeling blissed out, totally anxious, or furious. There's just no simple, clean map, which you have to admit is a pretty big point for the constructed emotion team. Okay, so if science can't find a consistent physical sideness spot in the brain, where does that leave us? This scientific puzzle actually opens the door for an even more radical idea, one that comes from non-dual spiritual traditions. And it doesn't just question how emotions are made, it questions whether they're even real in the first place. And this is the core claim, and it's a wild one. It's not just that emotions are constructed by our brains, it's that from this perspective, they don't actually inherently exist at all. So here's the key idea of the non-dual view. What we experience first isn't an emotion. It's just a raw, neutral flow of sensation in the body. Some heat, some tightness, some energy. The emotion itself only seems to pop into existence when our mind slaps a label on that raw data. It's just like how we apply the label blue to a specific wavelength of light. Before we call it blue, it's just light. And before we call a feeling sadness, it's just pure sensation. This table just shows how massive the difference is here. Traditional theory sees emotions as these hardwired things that are inherently good or bad, but the non-dual perspective just flips that completely. It says the raw sensations themselves are totally neutral. The labels we use, the stories we tell, and those judgments of good or bad, that's all stuff that our mind adds on top later. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Does this mean the goal is to become some kind of cold, unfeeling robot? No, not at all. Actually, it's the exact opposite. This perspective is an invitation to engage with our feelings more directly and more deeply than ever before. And this brings us to a really beautiful and kind of mind-bending paradox. The path to seeing through the illusion of emotions isn't to push them away or pretend they're not there. It's actually to feel them completely, without any resistance at all. Because something amazing happens when you do that. When you truly let yourself feel the raw sensations behind a label, like anger, the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw, but you do it without getting lost in the mental story of, I am so angry, the story it falls away. And that solid seeming emotion dissolves back into what it always was, a simple passing wave of neutral energy.
And this is something you can actually explore for yourself. The next time you feel a strong emotion coming on, just pause. First, ask yourself, okay, what am I actually experiencing in my body? What are the raw sensations, the tightness, the buzzing, the warmth, that I'm bundling up and calling sadness or anger? And then, here's the killer question. If you mentally take away that label, what is actually left? So, there you have it. We've kind of journeyed through 3 completely different ways to think about emotion. The idea that there are these hardwired biological programs, the theory that they're flexible interpretations our brains create on the fly, and finally, this radical non-dual view that they're simply mental stories we tell ourselves about a constant flow of neutral sensation. And that really leaves us with one last powerful question to think about. If our emotional reality is really shaped by the labels we use and the stories we tell, well, that puts a whole lot of power right back in our hands. So the question is, what story are you telling?